Salutations, ladies and gentlemen, the Knife Raven here, back again with another video, and in today's video I have something special for you. What you see before you is two knives purchased from Steel City Cutlery. Now, I've talked about Steel City Cutlery in the past. They're a retailer based out of Sheffield that sells primarily Sheffield silverware, but also Sheffield knives made by Wright. And they have a very nice selection, and their prices are quite reasonable, and I commented before that when I ordered from them, I received my shipment within 9 days of ordering in Canada. So already a very good start to a company, but interestingly enough, that wasn't the only purchase we made from them. We made a purchase in December for my father, and the intention was to get him a Christmas present. But unfortunately, the Royal Mail managed to get the package lost, and it didn't arrive until just a couple days ago in February, or rather the end of February. Anyways, somewhere along there, we had ordering insurance on the knife, and the store owner, Mr. Robert Day, who was very kind, informed us that he would send another knife. And, well, that should have been the end of it, right? One got lost, we get a replacement. Well, the two knives arrived on the same day. One of them within about 9 or so days of being sent, and the other a couple months after it should have shown up. Now, I don't know what the Royal Mail managed to do with it, but it got lost for a very long time, but arrived on the exact same day as the replacement. Anyways, my dad looked at them. Obviously, we gave them right to him because, well, Christmas is quite a while past, and the two knives, he looked at them and decided that considering how much it would cost to send one of them back, we just paid for both of them and he kept both of them. Now, I know I've rambled for 2 minutes, but I figured that story was kind of interesting because why do I have two of these knives in front of me? Well, it was because there was only supposed to be one of them, but I guess fate made it so that now my dad has two identical knives. Now, what knives did we get him? Or rather, which knife, I should say. Now, we got him one of these. He kindly let me borrow this again for the sake of the review. This is an Wright Sheepfoot, or Sheepfoot. And this is probably what he would say is his favorite traditional pattern. It's got a broad blade, carbon steel, it's got a bit of a patina already. And, again, not a terribly sharp tip, but a nice straight edge, which makes for easy sharpening. This model, of course, is in rosewood, and a very nice rosewood at that. But these models, or, again, the one that we originally purchased, was supposed to be a lot nicer, considering that these are in ebony. So we'll start, I think, with this one. This is the replacement. Oh, no, this one isn't. Never mind. I'm mixing them up. They both, of course, come in these velvet drawstring pouches. Now, I'm showing the replacement first, as it's arguably less impressive. But this is, I suppose, a bit of a quality assurance, if you will, to Wright. For those who recall, Slick Slicers, again, absolute legend in the Sheffield knife community, he originally, back in 2020, I believe, did a video showcasing 4 identical lambfoot knives in ebony, and using that as an example to say that their quality, Wright's, has drastically improved as he got 4 knives, plus the one I think he already had for himself, making it 5 total knives with all fairly consistent quality. Well, here we have 3 knives of the same variety, one of which I guess is in a different material, but these should be a good way of judging the quality of Wright, and whether you're going to get one that happens to be subpar or one that is good. And this is the replacement, and right away you can tell it has a very, very nice look to it. We have the sheen of ebony here, this inky black wood, very nice grain, very, very smooth. This is incredible, actually. The pins, despite being brass, obviously, you can hardly feel them. Even the change in material, the work done here is excellent. And considering the fact that I have a couple custom knives from Michael May, which cost probably at least double this, considering that those pins have been raised and I can feel them quite clearly, if Arthur Wright can manage to make them perfectly smooth at, I believe this cost around £40, thereabouts, before shipping, but beautifully smooth on both sides here. We have our nickel silver polished bolster, which tends to mess with the camera. There we are. Nice bit of a polish on there. We have brass liners and a steel spring, carbon steel spring. So this will patina along with the blade. You can see there seems to be a little bit of surface gapping. I say surface gapping. That's a term that I've never used before and probably won't stick. It's simply cosmetic. And you can see it. There seem to be little tiny bits of gapping here, here, and there. However, holding them up to the light, again, as I've said before, not a hint of it shines through. So these are gaps that are simply unappealing to the eye, but rather they don't actually affect the utility, or rather the overall construction of the knife. Hello, Alice. But on the subject of gapping, yes, it seems to be that there is some cosmetic, but nothing performance-based. Although right here, this is the only genuine gap on the entire knife by the spring. Centering is ever so slightly off to the right. Whether or not this is one you can correct yourself, I don't think so. But it's not rubbing. Very, very good overall, if not perfect. The nail nick is very well ground, but the blade sticks out enough you can pinch these. Spring on this, granted it's fairly new, I'd say a good 9 or a 10. And my nails look horrible now. Not like I care. But we have a satin finish on the C70 carbon blade, which has a light bit of oil on it. Again, this is a sheep's foot, so straight edge. Wouldn't say blunt tip, but definitely less pointed than a Warncliffe or a Lambfoot even. We have a Wright and Son Limited half cut off Sheffield. And if the camera will be so kind, this is something that I know the individual I mentioned earlier, Slick Slicers, would despise, as even in the half-open position, you still can't read England. You can read Sheffield, but the England is still hidden. And I know he said, and I agree with this, if a maker doesn't value their name, which is really, well, it is the foundation of their company. It's what they're known as, it's what they're referred to as, and it's the name that hopefully will live on for generations as being a good manufacturer. Well, if you can't even stamp your name in correctly, or rather, I should say, the country of origin, that should be something worth putting a bit more effort into. Would I consider this a fundamental, large-scale flaw that affects the performance? Not at all. Is it cosmetic and annoying? Yes, by all means. Blade play is non-existent, which is not surprising, as Arthur Wright knives almost never have blade play. Typical size of an A-Wright pocket knife, very comfortable in the hand, 4-finger grip. You can put your finger under the tang and get a very secure hold with this. This is, of course, based on that spring tension, is not a knife you're going to have to worry about closing on you. Transition from the spring to the blade is very good. And as for the sharpness, it's not blunt, but it's still Arthur Wright sharp, which is to say, it's not going to be user-ready out of the pack. So, there you are. I'd say that the overall fit and finish on this knife is excellent. In terms of robustness, you are not going to get just a stronger, stiffer knife than this. I would definitely call this a tank, and I think that's very appropriately used. We have a very robust, utilitarian carbon steel blade with a very dense wood handle. Everything's put together very well, nothing wobbles, and the spring tension is just a bear trap. Now, cosmetic-wise, yes, you can nitpick. You can argue, well, the tang stamp is not fully clear. There's a little bit of gapping, etc. But I'd still say that in the long run, this is a very, very well put together knife, and mirrors what I said on this version, which was the rosewood model. Again, extremely sturdy. Even after use, the spring is still very strong on this knife. Bit more bearable, though. And again, you just have a very robust, utilitarian knife made for the user. And granted, I'm sure a collector could appreciate this, but this is really a knife made to be used. Now, this is the replacement, and I'm going to try to speed this up as I'm already 10 minutes in. But the original knife that somehow got lost in the UK for over 2 months. This is that model, and when I say that this is the most beautiful grain of ebony wood I have ever seen in my time knife collecting, I do not exaggerate. Granted, perhaps there's some custom knives out there that I don't own that are better, but in terms of ones that I can attest to owning, this blows them out of the water. Now, the camera, there we are. The camera might not be able to pick this up and do it quite the level of justice it deserves. But this has some of the nicest grain I have ever seen. It has these brown streaks lining the wood. And again, I do not exaggerate when I say that the camera really does not do this justice. This handle is beautiful. But again, same model, exactly the same. We have the steel spring, again, a little bit of gapping here, which again, no life, my goodness. No light is shining through. I'd hope no life is shining through. But some cosmetic gapping at the back, a little bit up at the front as well. Once again, the pins are beautifully smooth here on both sides. Bolsters are even. The centering on this model is pretty much perfect. You can make the argument it's leaning a little bit to that side, but I'd say that's perfect. Blade tension here. I'd say that one's more pleasant, probably about 8 to 9 as opposed to 9 to 10. Same thing here, satin finished, carbon blade, straight edge with that fairly rounded tip. Again, it has a coat of oil on it. Blade play is non-existent, and the tang stamp is still not perfectly clear. You still need to open it halfway, but you can see the England a little bit better than you could on the other model, although there is some grease there. Get rid of that. There you are. A. Wright and Son Sheffield, or A. Wright and Son Limited, Sheffield, England. So, in terms of the stamp, this one's better. In terms of the action, I'd say it's a lot nicer. And in terms of the wood grain, this one is far superior. I know there are some that really like the simple all-black ebony, as it's kind of the typical appearance of the wood, but I really appreciate the more diverse range with the dark browns that contrast with the black. But this side is beautiful. This one I don't know if the camera can really showcase, but there's a lot more of the dark brown here with a streak of black lining the center there. Let's see if closing the blade will help with the light. Again, I apologize for my mediocre camera, but just again, perhaps of putting it up against the all-black ebony, that'll make it easier to see. That's a little bit better. You can see this one is lighter in color overall, and is just more detailed generally. But it's really this side that immediately caught my eye with those stripes. But overall, these are fairly similar in terms of overall fit and finish. I'd actually argue that the older one was a little bit better, and I'd definitely be biased towards it because of that wood grain alone. And comparing it to the Sheepfoot in rosewood that my father initially acquired, I would say that this trio of knives, in terms of utility, is faultless. I cannot complain about the utility on these. They are excellent knives. They have strong springs, and I know some people hate the strong springs, but it is an acquired taste. But for those who want a strong knife, and you have to bear in mind, living in the UK, you can't have locking knives, well, without a good reason. And so a knife like this would fill that role of a safety mechanism, as really, you're going to have to struggle to close that with one finger, considering the fact that they're difficult to open and close with multiple fingers. Trying to close it with just your thumb is going to be nearly impossible. And so this is a very safe knife, and I can definitely see the appeal in that. I personally like a bit of a lighter spring because I don't appreciate having to break my nails each time I open a knife. Even so, if I wasn't allowed to have a locking blade, I'd definitely go for something a lot stronger. Again, I am not the biggest fan of Sheepfoots, I'd say. I generally prefer the Lambfoot profile. Here's mine, actually. Do a comparison. Also an Ebony purchased at Steel City Cutlery. I've used this one a bit. I'll just move these out of the way so you can see a comparison between the blade shapes. The handles are pretty much the same. The blades in length are identical, but the Lambfoot is thinner, and the Sheepfoot is just broader overall. In terms of thickness, I'd also make the argument that the Sheepfoot is a hair thicker, but I have to measure them to find that out for sure. But either way, this is just another example of how Arthur Wright has been gradually making improvements. This knife wasn't perfect, in the cosmetic sense and even in the utility sense. It has an ever so slight bit of blade play, and the centering is, well, quite a bit off. Not rubbing, but considerably off to the left. These are slightly offset, or at least this one is, but not to the same degree. There's no blade play. And just overall, I'd say that the construction is a lot cleaner. I noticed that the Arthur Wright Sheepfoots aren't as popular as the Lambfoots, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. But if you like, say, the Ottermesser Anchor Messer, you will really enjoy this. These are, again, handmade, artisan, small batch knives. Traditional carbon steel, again, easy enough to sharpen, but they don't hold an edge for terribly long. And overall, I'd say that they are excellent knives. I've said that before, and I know I'm droning on at this point, but really, if you want to look at this as a quality assurance, I think that would be a fair thing indeed, because this is now 3 of the same pattern in 2 different materials, and the quality among them is really quite excellent. Again, they're not perfect, but of course they won't be. They're made by hand at a price point of under £50. So if you're expecting absolute perfection for £42, then that is unrealistic to say the least. But overall, I've rambled enough. These are excellent knives, and it's kind of amusing to me how, pardon me, how my father, who is not at all a typical collector, got this knife, received a second one, and now a third, and has really developed a fairly nice collection of these knives in and of itself. So there you are. I've turned my dad into a knife collector now, so we'll see how that turns out. But either way, I'm very happy with these personally. He is too, and I can absolutely recommend, if you want, go give Steel City Cutlery a try. I think they still have these knives available in this exact handle material, if I remember correctly. And the customer service is brilliant, the shipping time is wonderful, and the prices are very reasonable. And considering the fact that, again, the quality of Arthur Wright as a whole has been on the upward climb, I'd say, for the last few years, I think that's something to celebrate. And even if they aren't perfect, they are more than adequate. And for the user, I would say, yes, they are perfect. So, there you are. That's all I have to say. Wright Sheepfoots in Ebony. Very, very impressed, particularly with that one due to the wood grain. And hope you enjoyed. This has been the Knife Raven, as always, signing off. Goodbye.